this leads to an interesting area, because hearing you talk about how you studied the Clintons and your experience on like what women like and what resonates with them and what doesn't brings me to the moment in your book after the Access Hollywood tape came out with Trump and Billy Bush, and he asked you, do you think I should drop out? That's what you say in the book. And you said you can't. You're already on the ballot. It's like too late. This is right before the election. He says, can we still win? This is according to the book. And you say, maybe. And you go on in the book to raise a really good point that wound up, I think, being the settled narrative on Access Hollywood, which was, you say these things in this tape. Her husband did them. He did all this stuff. And we know it. And he was president for 8 years. And to me, Kellyanne, that seems to be the wind that was sort of behind Trump's back when he went into that debate. Remember, where they brought the Bill Clinton accusers were there, and it sort of did shift the narrative. And I remember thinking, okay, we need better choices here, because nobody wants more of Bill Clinton. Absolutely no one.
Right. And even when you talk about Bill Clinton, Megyn, I mean, it's very clear, as I write in the book, that Hillary Clinton, she was too much Hillary and not enough Clinton. There wasn't the charm and the connectiveness and somebody who looked like she enjoyed meeting people. It was all very contrived. Right. And yes, she referred to the Trump voters in one of the worst days of her campaign as, quote, deplorable and irredeemable. But it also just wasn't clear that she particularly liked being around people. Where is the evidence exactly? Mm. And so she didn't have her husband's gift for that. But I think more to the point, let me just clarify a few things, because the screaming headlines from the mainstream media have had that Donald Trump wanted to quit. I never used the word quit. He didn't use the word quit. We were talking about the paragraph that precedes what you just read was us talking about the fact that members of the Republican Party, donors, senators, people at the RNC who had sway over such things, had unendorsed him. These elected officials were unendorsing him that day, calling for him to step aside, and then speculating to the press, who was all too hungry to run with it, that they could rip him off the ballot. They can push him off the ballot. They could basically erase his nomination. And I told him, that's not true. They can't do that. The ballots are already printed.
Let me just ask, because what you say in the book is Trump asked you, quote, should I get out of the race?
Meaning before they do that, before that, we're talking about how, if you look at the paragraph or paragraphs before that, we're talking about how the rumors were that they were going to force him off the ballot. And so I think there was some attractiveness in trying to get ahead of that. And so, and the answer was they can't do that. They can't. And I know there were people actively trying to have a Mike Pence, Paul Ryan ticket and get Mr. Trump off the ticket. Look at all the people who unendorsed him, continue to criticize him all the way into his victory. And then he wins and they're freaking out. They're like, well, gosh, I didn't give a penny. I said all these terrible things about him. How do I get back in? But no, he's not a quitter. And he also doesn't like to lose. And I think what he did is recognize that people, the fact that people will debate and talk about what affects them, what offends them, but they vote according to what affects them. And I think in 2020, there was a little bit of that with COVID, that people were affected by that. And we had all these crazy ways of how you can vote that were different, more people voting in more ways over more time than ever before. But folks also had that very much on their mind. And that was affecting them, not just offending them when it came to COVID. So it was a very different situation.
Your experience with him as a top female in the White House was very interesting to me when I read the book, because, of course, as everybody knows, I asked Trump a very tough question about his language with respect to women and some of the treatment of women. And he didn't much like the question, but he handled it just fine. And then the sort of narrative was out there and ran, in part because of how he responded to that question after the fact. But your experience with him is one-on-one and it's extended. And what I gleaned from the book is it was nothing but positive and actually quite protective of you. And he stood up for you many times when that sort of boys network that, was kind of popping up in corners here and there and the other places. He stood up for you. And for the one time, I don't know, what was the situation where Sean Spicer went out there and said you'd been counseled? And Trump called him in there and said, how dare you? Don't you say that about her. You don't counsel her. We don't talk like that here.
He said that to the assistant White House counsel who had never met the president. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And he said, I said, but what were you thinking? He said, well, I had never met him before, so this was kind of fun. But no, he was protective. And he also, and the president was very protective of me through the very dark days of my family situation as well. And I do write in the book that there were two men in my life, my husband and my boss, Megyn. I don't equate the two. One is a job. One is my marriage. So I don't equate the two. You know, your marriage vows are supposed to have no term limit. They're not a job. It's your life. But there were many, many days, Megyn, if not months, where Donald Trump was very protective of me, knowing that it was incredibly difficult for my children and me to endure all of that. And I felt it was almost a safe place to be, honestly, to put my head down and do my work. And I appreciate that. I appreciate First Lady Melania Trump checking in regularly. I appreciate the president not talking about how it all was affecting him. Because, you know, he loves his own Twitter feed. He's going to go pay attention to George Conway's Twitter feed. He's the president of the United States. He's got a lot going on. He's worried about Putin and Kim Jong-un. He's not worried about George Conway's tweets. And he rarely mentioned George in his tweets to me. Other people were always mentioning George Conway's tweets to him. They do to this moment.
Take a moment and think of the best burger you've ever had. Picture it fondly. Imagine that first mouth-watering bite and then throw it in the trash. Why? Because you're about to have a new favorite burger. I'm talking about the American Wagyu burgers from Good Ranchers. The only thing that can make them better is that you get 2 pounds of them free with my code Megyn. You have a problem. I have a problem. We all have a problem, and it's a meat problem. The problem is that 85% of the grass-fed beef in stores and online is imported from overseas. Don't pay a premium for low-quality foreign meat. Good Ranchers sells 100% American meat and delivers it to your door for a great price. Good Ranchers helps solve your meat problem with free shipping. Go to goodranchers.com/Megyn now. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. And if you don't buy the meat in your house, tell the person who does to check out Good Ranchers. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.